We are happy that you found us here at the Erasing Shame podcast, Season 8. Our theme this season is Raw, Real, and Redeemed, Christian faith, struggles, and the what we don't talk about enough. Now here's your hostess with the mostest, Aggie Park.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast, where we have real and redeemed conversations about the topics we usually do not talk about, but should. This week, we have a very special guest, Hannah Lee. She is my beloved sister in Christ, my friend, also my therapist. She's one of the most hilarious, encouraging, uplifting, compassionate, patient person I've ever met. And so I'm really, really excited to have her on this podcast this week. And she also was a co-host for this Erasing Shame podcast for the past season. So welcome, Hannah.
Also, for people out there, you're not supposed to usually be friends with your therapist, but we're in kind of a unique situation and we focus on a certain kind of Christian counseling situation. So, yeah, we're an exception for a dual relationship. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I know that the topic today is something that's really important and close to your heart, close to mine, and I'm excited to see what God will do.
Yes, amen. Yeah, this week's topic has been really heavy on my heart. It's forgiveness versus reconciliation. And we've heard so many messages about, making peace and reconciliation at all cost when it's just not reality, it's not biblical. And this huge misunderstanding and sometimes abuse of scripture has caused a lot of pain and hurt in my own heart. And I'm sure in a lot of people's heart. Um, so I just want to dig deep into what is actually biblical forgiveness and what it is not, and how does it differ from reconciliation, because I feel like as we talk about it and dig towards the truth, we can break this like harmful and toxic cycle of just piling so much shame and guilt and weight and condemnation. So my prayer and hope is after this podcast that listeners would just feel lighter. They would feel peace that in some situations, even though we have forgiven this person, in some situations it's just not possible or not safe to have the re-entering that relationship. So Hannah, what is the biblical definition of forgiveness and how does that differ from reconciliation?
So I'm going to give a caveat is I did go to seminary, but I didn't study theology. I studied missiology, and we're definitely more like practical theology in terms of like how do things look like in real life? How do we apply it? Regardless of what we say or we're doing, what are we actually doing? And how, the cultural context. Like, for example, we're Asian American in America, right? How that changes, sort of how we might interpret and apply scripture. Um, so I wouldn't be the authority on like what is biblical forgiveness, but I do a lot of Christian and Bible-based counseling and prayer-based counseling, which is the kind of relationship you and I have, rather than just like a clinical psychotherapy counseling. So I like to kind of look somewhere in the middle between like what do we know there are biblical foundations for, but also in practice, what does this look like, right? So biblically, as simple as, and I have little kids at home and I teach them when we forgive, right, we're releasing our right to be angry and bitter at the person. We're letting go of our right and authority to punish them or decide their punishment. And we're letting go, or we're starting the journey of letting go of the hurt and the anger, because it's not instant, right? It's something that takes time. And sometimes the other person, like if it's between siblings, they might be part of the process, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, right? sorry, I hit you. Okay, I forgive you, right? That's very different from, you hit my child with a truck and now they're in the
Right.
hospital, right?
Right.
Forgive me. It doesn't work that way, right? It's a very
Right.
different situation.
Right.
Um, yeah, God forbid that happens to anybody, but like that extreme of a difference. So, you know, when I was growing up in church, actually, I was very fortunate to have wonderful youth pastors. Many of them were actually Fuller Seminary grads, which is one of the reasons I ended up going there. But one of my pastors gave a sort of picture and used bits and pieces of scripture and like parables, but this idea of the person who borrowed money from the king, right? He also
Mm-hmm.
was lending money to other people,
Right.
and he was supposed to go to jail, but the king was like, "I will forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
Go and live your life," right? And the guy's like in disbelief and goes off and sees someone who owes him a fraction of what he owed the king, and threw that guy in jail for a much
Mm-hmm.
lesser amount. And when the king found out,
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Oh no, I don't think so." Threw that
Right.
guy in jail, right? And so using this idea of forgiveness and unforgiveness as, forgiveness is when I have the right, you've wronged me, and I have the right to put you in some sort of like confinement or punishment, whether it's confinement in my heart of I don't like you, I'm mad at you, or like real confinement, right? Like a legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And when we forgive someone, we're saying, I release the right to confine you, and I release the right to punish you and have you pay the price in another way, right? Like I'm going to take that cost on myself kind of deal. Because the king at the end of the day is the one that lost the money, right? And so he's like, Okay, you borrowed $1 million from me. I'll let it go. I'll just take that as a minus, right? Whereas the other guy was like, you borrowed $1,000 from me. I cannot let that go. It's not a minus that I can handle, even though he
Right.
just was given $1 million. So the youth pastor was like, when you don't forgive someone, it's like keeping them in a jail cell in your heart, and you hold the key, and you're going to punish them in there, but you're holding them in there, and the bars of the cell is made up of like anger and unforgiveness and bitterness, right? Our teaching, because I grew up in a sort of charismatic, youth group as I got older, was you know evil demonic spirits actually are drawn to unforgiveness and bitterness, and they'll start to torment you because the jail cell's inside of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then when we want to be like, oh Lord, deliver me, I don't want the enemy to have authority in my life or any rights to torment me like this. We're in essence saying, Jesus, I'm stuck here because unforgiveness has its own energy and bitterness has its own energy. And even if we cognitively decide to forgive and let go of somebody, it doesn't happen so easily because it's also very spiritual, right? But we give Jesus the key to the jail cell inside and say, I've been holding unforgiveness, anger and unforgiveness and bitterness in my heart towards this person. And then, here's the catch that all the youth kids are like, oh, mind blown, is you walk with Jesus to the cell of your heart and you expect to find the other person who hurt you, but they turn around and it's you, right? Like you've been keeping yourself in
Right.
bitterness and unforgiveness. You thought you were punishing that other person, but unforgiveness is
Mm-hmm.
when you're actually allowing yourself to be punished on top of
Mm-hmm.
the harm done to you.
Right.
You're allowing that harm to actually repeat itself, right? And to continue. And then so the teaching was like when you forgive someone, it's giving Jesus the key, and then he walks with you, and together you unlock the thing, the door, and then you come out. That part of you that was hurt, you come out, and Jesus
Mm-hmm.
restores that part to you, right? And that is when actually forgiveness is when spiritually we release what, our false right to punish somebody, and that actually releases God. Not that he didn't have the authority, but there's this like, God being a part of the process with us, where he says, "Okay, are you sure you're letting go of this? Let go and let God. Like, if you give me the key, I'll make sure they get what they're owed."
Right.
Like karma in a way is biblical. Like God is the king of karma. All right. He's like, vengeance is mine. I am the king of
Right.
this. Yeah. And so it's trusting that God is a strong God who's
Mm-hmm.
fair. He sees everything. He knows
Yes.
everything. He knows
Mm-hmm.
exactly how deeply hurt you were and he's gonna
Mhm.
make sure that whoever hurt you is gonna get what's coming their way,
Mhm.
even if it is another Christian, right?
Right.
He'll deal with them in their own way, whether it's
Mhm.
Jesus's blood covering the other person and bringing the forgiveness or something else, right? So forgiveness, in essence, is setting yourself free from the burden of the authority to hold that person accountable and punish them, right? And unforgiveness is also a lie that forgiving them would be just letting it go, right?
Mm.
No, we're not letting it go and dropping it in the ocean, we're giving
Mhm.
it to Jesus, who's gonna be sitting on the throne being like, "Mm-mm,"
Mhm.
order in court, right? With, like, swords around. So, it's trusting that God will make everything fair,
Mhm.
right? As only He can, and then beginning a healing process and a freedom process in our own heart to get set free from the anger, the bitterness, and the hurt that the original offense caused, right? So that is not the same thing as reconciliation. Um, what forgiveness is not, that I think a lot of different spaces, not just the church, but like a lot of wellness, social media, like
Mm.
yoga and wellness and live your best life, sort of that space.
Yeah.
Even I feel like in Buddhism with like the whole non-attachment, there's
Mm.
a little bit of that. In many different spiritual religious spaces, there's sort of toxic ideas of letting go without actually having room to like process through pain and hurt. For example, like, I mean, all power to anybody who can say, I forgive that person who severely harmed me and my family, right? Even if lives were lost. Like, wow, like I'm impressed. But
Mhm.
like, are you just saying that because you're telling
Mm.
yourself that's what you have to do and you don't have a choice, or your deity's gonna punish you? Or
Right.
like, do you sincerely in your heart
Mm.
like feel that freedom to be like, I don't need to see you punished in the same way anymore, right? That said, I think there's this gray area, especially as a clinician for me, like when, if somebody murdered my child and then they're on death row because they murdered a lot of people's kids, I don't want to be at the execution, but I also don't think there's a problem with other people needing to see that to get their healing and their justice in this lifetime, right? I mean, who knows? God forbid that ever happened to me or anyone I know, but like I would like to say I don't need to see that for myself, but I don't judge anybody else who does, right? There are
Right.
times where we just need to know as a part of our healing process. And I can't judge anybody else for that. But forgiving somebody, like in the case of if you harmed my child, I have friends actually from seminary who their mothers were sexually assaulted and raped, and
Mm.
that's how they were conceived. So they've
Mm.
never met their biological sperm donor
Mm.
father
Right.
who raped their mother, right? And it was a
Mm.
one-time thing, right? A lot of times a
Mhm.
stranger. We are not expecting reconciliation there because
Right.
reconciliation is restoration of relationship.
Mhm.
Forgiveness is more about my relationship to myself and my
Yeah.
relationship to God, not so
Mhm.
much my relationship to the other person. It's a one-way thing, right? It's internal.
Mhm.
Restoration of relationship or reconciliation is the two-way. Do we forgive
Yes.
each other? Do we want to be in each other's lives? In the
Mhm.
case of like a rapist and then that person, and should they choose to keep a life, like, oh my God, like I support women who want to erase the baby of a rape, right? Like I would not want somebody to go through that unless they felt convicted about it,
Mm.
not religiously forced or expected, right?
Mm.
But if they keep that child, I wouldn't expect the child and the parent to be in relationship with the rapist.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I would be very, very concerned. That would have to be like, "Thus saith Jesus," like I heard an audible voice, right?
Right.
Like supernatural something. So there are times where I think people confuse the two.
Mm.
And it's funny because a lot of people don't actually understand the word reconciliation either, right?
Mhm.
Or the process of reconciliation. But in scripture, I think it's easy to mix because the teachings on forgiveness and the teachings on reconciliation seem to almost be synonymously used, at least the way that taught in
Mm.
church. I don't know that the people who are listening in the Old and New Testaments would have confused it the way that we do in modern age.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I
Mm.
feel like it's like a a product of modern westernization that we interpret scripture a certain way. And a lot of times, when we're looking, like you and I are talking as like, youngish Asian American women, right?
Mhm.
If we were growing up 50 years ago here in America, everybody in power pretty much, well, it's okay, maybe 80 years ago, would be like white men, right? It still is, but to a greater extent, even in churches and every aspect of society and government. Um, that's where, for somebody who's in power and has influence, even in like a religious setting, can talk down to people who are less powerful than them because we are not the same demographic as them, right? That's where they say, well, you have to forgive and forget. That's where you have to forgive and reconcile. Like, I'm gonna slap you on the butt and sexually harass you in church, but you still have to smile and forgive me and you have to be
Right.
nice to me, right?
Mhm.
There is this imbalance of power. I
Mm.
feel like that contributed to why so many people in a church setting were taught you have to forgive and then smile. Forgiveness means you're
Right.
happy. Forgiveness means
Mm.
you're nice again and you're loving
Mhm.
again, right? I
Mhm.
don't think it's the same thing. The other
Mhm.
thing is like I think the more appropriate term is actually like or framework, and you're in finance background, so finance,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
forgiveness of debt. Like those of us who took out student
Right.
loans, we understand, you know, our loan can be forgiven or our loan will not be forgiven. I think that's
Yeah.
a much more accurate and applicable view of what forgiveness means in contrast to reconciliation. I
Mhm.
think there's like reconciliation sheets on in finance too, right?
Mhm.
Those are
Yeah, yeah.
different terms. That's not a
Mhm.
mistake, right? Like I think in the Bible that was very, very like intentional. So to reconcile something versus to forgive something, two different things.
Mhm.
Actually, I would love to ask you. I'm doing all the talking, but like in
Okay.
finance, how would you, tell somebody what is the difference between forgiving a debt and reconciling a debt? Is it different?
Yeah, I love how you bring finance into this. I never thought of it that
I
way.
I confirm. Yeah.
Forgiveness, I think, like, if you forgive a debt, it's just like you said, it's a one-sided thing. Like, you choose to forgive that
Mhm.
someone's debt, and that person just receives it.
Uh-huh.
But reconciliation is two sides. Like, two sides has to balance. It has to be
Uh,
equal. So,
there we go.
yes, it's just like I think I read the book Good Boundaries and Goodbye by Lisa Turkest, and she
Mm.
talked about how if that person doesn't have you cannot give a level 10 access to that person if that person has a level 1 or 0 responsibility or care or safety towards you. Like, it has to match. Like, the
Yeah.
way they care and love for you
Uh-huh.
has to match the access you give them,
That's right.
right? And
That's
so it's
right.
just like in finance, like, it has to match. It has to
Mhm.
tie.
Mhm.
Like, I love
Mhm.
the way that you brought up finance. It makes sense now. Like, it
Yeah.
clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a Hebrew tattoo I got when I turned 30. Not 18, folks, 30. And it says Geula. It's Hebrew for redemption. And
Mm,
it's like, somebody told me it's like on a finance sheet or a receipt or an invoice stamping paid. It's basically that, right? Like I'm gonna redeem
right.
my coupon, like this is paid for, right? Yeah, you might as well change this in English to PAID. Like she's paid for. Um,
Yeah.
that's very much like the idea of forgiveness not just being this like religious spiritual woo idea that's
Mhm.
not tangible. There's a tangible idea of what forgiveness is in contrast to reconciliation. Yeah, so biblical forgiveness, I think it's hard to give like a quick answer to that.
Mm,
But definitely we know what it's not. It's not
right.
social bypassing, it's not pretending everything's okay. It's not um treating something, and that's one of the other things that I see a lot in therapy.
Mm,
You know, I actually there was a woman from Asia and
mm,
grown woman, but she was telling me about something that happened in her college years, like 20s.
mm,
And it was, along the lines of like molestation, sexual assault, that kind of like
mm.
unsafe touching, illegal, right?
Yeah. Right, right.
Um, But the way she described it and the look on her face was like, "Oh,
Mm.
yeah, that thing happened, it was annoying," you know? I was
Oh,
like, I'm sorry, can we backtrack?"
right.
In America, that's something that you report to the police.
Yes.
You report to the university, get that guy fired,
Right, right,
ruin
right,
his life, like, put him on Instagram and Twitter, and, like, he's ruining
right.
all the young ladies, he needs to be canceled.
Yeah.
But her response was surprise to me. She was
Mm,
like she had it, like, so small thing, and I had, like, a huge thing. She's like,
mm,
"Why are you overreacting and being so dramatic? This happens I thought this happens to
mm,
everybody at that age."
mhm,
And my mind was blown, like,
mm,
just blown, right?
right.
So, in Asia, you know, a lot of these things that in America we've learned over time to make bigger, I guess, they've made so small, right? That even for a man to be brought to accountability if he's in a position of power of
Right.
authority, like a professor over a student or a boss,
Mm,
a manager over, an entry level temp employee, there's no system to make a small thing big because the whole culture and society has made things so small. If we
yeah.
look at, in my work, when people treat things that are really, really big and they don't even know how it's impacted them and they hold it in their head as so small, they can't even fully forgive or get healing and start to like mend because they're treating us, like I don't know if you like amputated a limb and they're like, "Oh, it's just a scratch."
Right,
You're bleeding out.
right,
You know, a Band-Aid is not gonna do it, honey.
right.
You have to properly assess the
Mhm,
size of the harm
mhm,
so that you can even do the work of deciding, "Do I forgive?" 'Cause I
mm,
don't begrudge my clients who are like, "I will never forgive that person for that, kind of abuse."
mhm,
And I'm like, "Makes a lot of sense."
right.
They need to go through a stage at least,
Yes.
even if it's a years-long stage of
Mhm.
so angry, how could my mother
Yeah,
or father or my
right.
spouse or whoever have done something that egregious and
Mhm.
hateful to me? I don't know if
Yes.
I can ever forgive him. That's real. That's a lot healthier than,
Right.
"Oh, yeah, no, I mean, they forgot to feed us and, like, hit us with, like, whips and, sent us half
Right.
naked," you know? No, 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 no. no. Properly assess the size of the debt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the fact that you said like forgiveness oftentimes is not instant. It's a process. And
Yeah.
I think like Christians just love to just like forgive now, like now. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's not like that. Like you said, like sometimes like the abuse is just so huge and so long, like you have to have the time and space to process and to heal,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like also like you said, like that lady from Asia, like I think as Asians, we're so I don't know, so obedient and conform to whatever other people are saying that we don't have our own voice. Like for
Mhm.
example, from my backstory in my childhood, right? Like this one parent, like I received like physical and emotional abuse growing up. But then all my life, like my family members and just other people, and even nowadays, like people just pressure me to just reconcile and just have a relationship with this side of a parent
Yeah.
because she's quote unquote family.
Yeah.
So, but then because, and I want to you to explain how like the psychological and like scientific facts, like how the trauma stores, I mean, the body stores
Mhm.
trauma.
Mm.
It's just like if I am being with that person that hurts me, I cannot let my inner child, I cannot let my past heal. I cannot think and process correctly. So the trauma will always be stored in my body.
Yeah.
And that will also not only affect my mental health, but also my physical health later
Oh,
on.
yeah. Yeah.
So I just want people
Yeah.
to understand that, it's okay. Like even with family members, like if they pressure you, or even with leaders or church members or whoever, right? If they pressure you to just like reconcile without giving you the time and space to heal, to
Yeah.
process and heal, like that's not going to be healthy for you both emotionally and physically in the long term.
No.
So
No. Well,
Um,
causing harm, and we'd actually call that, like, spiritual abuse if it's happening in the church.
right.
You've heard of, Greece Community Church, John MacArthur's church?
Mhm.
They've been around a long time. I mean, I'm not a MacArthur fan personally, but I did go to the school for, like, a year or 2 growing up. Um, 2 years? 2.5 years? 3 years? 2.5. And, I mean, there were good times, nice Christian people. But my beliefs just started to be different, and I got more deconstructed and, aware of, like, oh, you know, um, it was all white people who were really wealthy, and, how did that affect my development growing up? But, I heard a couple years ago that they're in the news because they have this counseling center. And I mean, I just think it's amazing that the church has a counseling center to start with, like, that's
Mhm.
great, right? You should have
Yeah.
that. The problem was that these women who were coming to the counselors, I think, who are both male and female, right? Um, with domestic violence stories of, "My husband is beating me and the kids.
Mhm.
That is abusing me and the children." And even if it's not just, if it's just a wife, like, probability and percentage-wise, research shows that a husband who's hitting the wife is eventually gonna hit the kids. Like, it's
Mhm.
just too likely, right? So you don't keep them in the same home. And the counselors, the reason why it got in the news was the counselors were like, the women wanted to leave the home. Like, should I leave? Should I forgive? Like, I've been putting up with this for years already. I barely
Right.
just came to tell you guys. Like, it's not like it happened for the first time yesterday. This has been happening 5, 10 years, and I finally got the courage to tell you because all my friends told me I had to, right? Or my kid's
Mhm.
suicidal, or my kid's depressed. Like, I know
Yeah.
the game only to be told by these counselors. And this is not like just this one church, by the way. This is, like, all across the world, right? And it's been happening in America in particular for a very long time, but people being like, "Oh, but I mean, like, he's not cheating on you, he's not addicted to drugs, like, not
Right.
looking at pornography, he's just hitting you once in a while when you do something he doesn't like, and then, like, he gets so mad he loses his temper, and then he apologizes later, but he's just hitting you once in a while." Like,
Mhm.
well, right? "Oh, yeah, I know, that's really bad, though, he shouldn't be hitting you at all."
Yeah.
Of course. But the
Mhm.
Bible does say, "Turn your cheek, turn the other cheek," and 77 times 7,
Right, right.
right? And
Mhm.
what's gonna happen to the kids if you leave him or divorce? Like, what kind of
Mhm.
message is gonna send to the other non-Christians in your like,
Mhm.
shaming them and guilting them
Yes.
and manipulating them into staying in an
Mhm.
abusive situation.
Mhm.
I'm so glad that got exposed and got into the news. I hope
Mhm.
other churches and other programs took that seriously. That is never okay to condone violence and abuse and neglect, especially of children. But this kind of spiritual abuse and, spiritual bypassing of, well, forgiveness is just, it's almost used like a weapon, like a hammer, right? Someone's like, "I'm finally gonna speak up and tell you that I'm being abused," and you take forgiveness
Right.
as a weapon, you're like, wham! You know?
And
No.
just crash.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
over
Stop
again.
complaining,
Right.
Be a nice, happy Christian housewife or mother, whatever, whatever. Horrible.
Right.
So, so horrible. But I'm glad you said that. Like, if somebody is in a position of authority or power over you or I, and they're telling you to do something that feels so wrong inside, to
Mhm.
not deal with the pain and the realness of unsafety, and then just go right back into that relationship pretending everything's okay
Right.
when nothing has changed and that person hasn't admitted they've done anything wrong, there's been no accountability, no
Mhm.
nothing. That's unsafety and, in my opinion, an insanity. Right? Like, that is not good leadership. There are a lot of
Right.
messed up leaders, y'all. I have 2 master's degrees. I've gotten to see all kinds of leaders, Christian and non-Christian. That title, that PhD degree, that, DMin, that 20 years of experience doing this and that CEO title ain't nothing. It just means that they have more trauma and probably a longer list of sins a lot of the time. Like, a good leader, the sign of a good leader is humility, right? Is
Mhm.
they will be the
Yes.
first to tell you all the mistakes they've made along the way, right? But yeah, no, 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 no. It's like, "No, cut that out."
No.
So there's a book, and a lot of people, we read it in school for social work and psychology and, other places. And I think a lot of, like, book clubs and other people at schools, they've started to read it too. But The Body Keeps Score by Bessel
Mhm.
van der Kolk, and there's so many others, but that's the one that kind of went viral maybe,
Mhm.
oh, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't know when it was written, but there's like conferences and everything, and he's amazing. Not perfect, but amazing. But he was pointing out how, like, in the animal kingdom, um, that I think it's him. I've read so many trauma books that confuse the stories. But even the animal kingdom, when like a predator is chasing a small animal, like a tiger running after a rabbit, right? When
Mhm.
that rabbit finally gets away and they're done being chased and they're like hiding in a hole shivering, right?
Mm.
They actually do this like really intense shivering
Mm.
because the
Mhm.
trauma got stored up. All the
Right,
adrenaline,
right, right, right.
cortisol, everything that
Mhm.
was flowing through their veins to get them to run faster than ever to live, they're shaking it out. And then they kind of go on with their life because they're small little animals, right?
Yeah.
So it's like God's created the small little creatures who are so cute to have this like outlet. Humans,
Mm.
we're also creatures though, right? We're mammalian creation.
Mhm.
We don't shake every time, you know?
Right.
Children actually do. You'll see children shake and rock and they'll show it in their body, but as
Mhm.
adults, it's not like every time we go through trauma, we like shake, right?
Oh, yeah.
There are actually people who practice a certain kind of movement that mimics kind of like shaking and different kinds of releasing of trauma in the body. But basically, in trauma, the body records and stores exactly how you felt in that moment of unsafety, usually panic, terror, fear, all these things that feel very powerless. Something horrible is happening to us, we can't do anything about it. And the
Mhm.
nervous system almost takes a snapshot of like, I remember exactly how that felt. You see this with veterans of war with PTSD. They hear a tire pop, right? Or like a firework go off.
Mm.
And
Yes.
I've heard stories, I haven't seen this myself, where like literally people have like they can't see something in front of them anymore. They can't hear anything happening outside. Like their whole body and brain transports right back to the war zone, right? And then they act out, right? That we've seen movies that kind of describe that kind
Mhm.
of PTSD. Now, that's like a very dramatic version. In our lives, it might be, I don't know, say, I have a lot of clients with ADHD and like academic trauma, and just, parents being very, very mean and teachers being very, very negative and mean. So if they had a moment of like utter humiliation, right, as a student in school. Then at a workplace as an adult 25 years later, if their boss is calling them out for something, not one on one, but it happens to be in front of everybody, their
Mm.
body and brain subconsciously will go right back to that
Mhm.
moment when they were 10, being humiliated
Yeah.
in front of the whole class for not getting 100% or whatever, right? These are all Asian clients I work with almost all. So, that stuff can be a lot. But, releasing it does mean, like, for a lot of my clients, I would say at least a fourth of my clients over the years have left a toxic workplace because
Mm.
they had workplace trauma that was
Mm.
bringing up too much from their past. So they were
Mm.
going to work every day and getting reharmed and reharmed,
Right.
right? It's like if I have a cut, and I keep it
Yes.
clean, it'll self-heal. But if I have a
Yes.
cut and it's because I, like, I don't know, work in something where I keep getting cut and I keep going
Mm.
back, and I never have enough time to stay away from that environment where I keep getting cut and I have no
Mhm.
protective gear, I'm never gonna get better. It's gonna get infected, right? And I'm probably
Right.
gonna lose the limb. So it's
Yes.
like that's where we don't wanna force reconciliation on people when it's, like, clearly unsafe. Don't send that wife and kids back to a violent,
Mhm.
alcoholic husband, you know? Don't go back to that workplace where your supervisor is, like, not well and very mean and keeps verbally
Mhm.
abusing you in front of everybody, and you're getting triggered and you're acting out. Like, don't go back to that, right? If at all possible. Now, I think you and I have talked about how there are a lot of situations where, like, you're not, I have friends, and family, they're like, "Oh, man, I just don't wanna be in this relationship anymore," with whomever. A spouse, their own kid who's in their teenage rebellion years,
Mhm.
an in-law, a grandparent that they're taking care of in Alzheimer's or dementia, just difficult family situations, a next-door neighbor, right? A landlord, an employer, a pastor or an elder, just
Mhm.
somebody. And
Right.
because you're not ready to leave the family, the marriage, the job, the church,
Mm.
it's like you just have to see that person. That's where I
Mhm.
would say, you know, we can go in with protective gear, right? And we can strategize, we can prepare.
Mm.
We can also, like, pre-plan and ask for help from other people, right? To go into situations like that very carefully. But, I'm really big on, like, but as soon as you hit your threshold of, like, I'm really not okay, I'm about to explode in my trauma reaction. Walk away, right? Or run away, like Jesus or Joseph with Potiphar's wife. Run,
Right.
even if you
Run.
leave behind your coat. Even if, gotta leave behind a piece of evidence, like, run, get out of there.
Right.
I often say run to the bathroom because nobody's gonna stop you from, "Oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Nobody stop me, get out of my way." Run to the
Yeah.
bathroom, start breathing again, and, check in with the Lord, check in with yourself. Do I need to be here or do I need to go home? Right? Yeah,
Right.
that's really, really hard.
It's hard, but okay, how do you deal with and give me like or give us like examples of just words to say just people constantly pressuring you or shaming
Mhm.
you
And set boundaries.
to yeah, to just reconcile because quote unquote, like if you don't, because it's a funny thing, right? Like reconciliation, you can see it's visible. Like if both parties like are in a relationship again, people can see that. But forgiveness is such a complex, invisible thing. I feel like it's between you and the Lord and the other person. It's like such a complex thing.
Yeah.
So, but then still, like somehow we think like if we haven't reconcile with that person, we haven't forgiven that person. And how do we like lovingly and truthfully say,
Yeah.
to that person the when it feels like not it feels like, but when they're telling you, oh, because you haven't reconciled,
Uh-huh.
you're unloving, you're blah blah blah, you're not even a Christian, for example.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
how do you deal with that? Because it hurts. Like, you
Yes.
can talk about me. I mean, it hurts. But if you talk about my faith with
Yeah.
Jesus, don't
Yeah.
even go there.
Yeah, don't
Don't
even,
even
right?
go there.
Yeah, you can talk about me, but not my mama. Absolutely. Yeah,
Like, how do you deal with that? Just weight and anger and also
yeah,
like shame and guilt and
yeah.
condemnation. Like, how do you deal with? How do you
So
process?
so there's, like, a couple things happening here, okay? When they come at you like that, they have a reason why they're saying that, because they could just keep their mouth shut.
Right? I
They can
know. Just
pray for
why?
you behind the scenes, right? But when they're coming at you and they feel like they need to say something to you and confront you and ask you to do something, there's something motivating them, and oftentimes it's their own experience and their story. "Well,
Mm,
I forgave the person who harmed me, so why don't you? That's not fair."
mm,
Right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or, "I'm worried about you. Your soul's gonna land in hell because you're not doing this, and then I'll feel guilty if I don't say anything, so I gotta correct
Right.
you." Neither
Mm,
of those is the right spirit. And then the other thing is you said that those words cause feelings of shame, guilt,
mhm.
all sorts of things, and unsafety, right? Because you're not being judged unfairly.
Right.
So I would say, first of all, identify those people who are a little not great at social skills, not the best communicators, not the most spiritually mature, right? Like,
Mhm,
to me, those are signs of spiritual immaturity and unresolved trauma on their end.
mhm,
There's a saying that I heard that I really like. What that person said or did says more about them than it does about
mm,
me. Even if it was
mm,
directed to me,
mm,
this is more about them.
mhm,
So say, I don't know, say you had a small group leader and your small group leader's like, "Hey, I just gotta talk to you about, this thing or this person, and I know they really hurt your feelings, but they're growing. Like, you should give them another chance, and, like, we're all in, this together. You should be friends with them again." And you're like,
mhm.
right? Because this person is also in a position of authority over you.
Yes.
Really, that's why they
Mhm.
think they can say something to you, and
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
and as a young female, right? And you're small and petite and pretty, and you look like a doll, so people think it's even easier to just talk down to you like a kid.
I hate that.
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm a bit past that. You got some years to go. But yeah, it's a thing, right? They treat you like
Mhm.
a child. That's where you can kind of like take a breath, right? I would say
Mhm.
notice, to anybody watching this, like notice the reaction you're having and just put a pin in it. Like, okay,
Mm.
I did not like that. I'm really upset right now.
Mm.
I'm so angry. Put a pin in
Mm.
it and then put the ball back in their court. Say, oh,
Mm.
you seem to be really concerned about me. Did something like this happen to you?
Mm.
Oh, what's your worry? Are you worried for my salvation? Thank you. Pray for me. And then walk away. Right?
Yeah.
Or if you're in a really good place and you just feel like the spirit of the Lord is on you, tell them, uh, thank you for your concern. I think you're seeing forgiveness and reconciliation as the same thing. And as far as I've studied and learned, they're two very different things. And then here's where you can, cheeky little response of like, I'm actually from a finance background, and like when we use those words, they're two very different things. I know
Mhm.
biblically you can argue some other interpretation, but like I have forgiven that person, just so you know. But I don't feel that the Lord has called me yet to reconciliate.
Mhm.
But I'm
Mhm.
definitely praying for it. I would love that if the person would take responsibility
Mhm.
and take
Mhm.
the steps to restore a relationship. Gosh, like that would mean the world to me.
Right.
Would you please talk to that person about that?
Right?
Like, nice to me. Or
So
but
funny
anyway,
though.
put the ball back in their court to be like, oh,
Mhm.
thank you for your concern. I just see things a different way, and I'm waiting on God's calling, right? Especially in a
Mm.
religious setting. I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the right timing, because I don't want to do this alone, right? I'm not
Mhm.
trying to do this by myself, by my own strength. I'm waiting for spiritual guidance. And like I'm really just praying and waiting for God to give me the time. And honestly, like if it never happens, I'm cool with that, you know,
Yeah.
because I've forgiven them. I'm
Right.
cool with that. Like I don't need to get an apology from them. I don't need to restore the relationship. I've just let it go. And it's in God's hands now. So
Mm.
when that person wants to come to me to reconcile, I'll be happy, but I don't feel called
Right.
to be the person to reach out for that. If
Yeah.
I do, I'll do it. Thank you so much
Right.
for your concern. Bye. The other thing is then
Yeah.
now there's a part of you, and I don't have training in IFS, which is internal family system, but very
Mm.
familiar with inner child dynamic, inner critic dynamics.
Mm.
When we have those big feelings of shame, guilt, a lot of
Mm.
times it's a younger sort of memory, and we talked about how trauma gets stored in the body. It's a
Mhm.
series of memories and nervous system states and memories of that nervous system state and our reaction to the unsafety at different
Mhm.
parts of our childhood. They don't get encoded and held in the brain in a normal way like other memories. They're almost like scattered about, and they're just kind of like lying around unorganized, almost like ticking time bombs, and they're not like held together very well and organized. So anything and anybody could trigger them on accident,
Mm.
unconsciously. But by the
Mhm.
time that we know that that has happened, usually we've already had the big reaction. The bomb's gone off. We've snapped at somebody. We've started bursting out in
Mm.
tears. We've run away. We've said something mean, whatever, whatever. We
Mhm.
do
Mhm.
the thing that we wish we'd been able to do when the original scary thing happened when we were a kid, basically, right?
Mm.
It's usually some sort of fighting back. Sometimes it's
Right.
shutting down, but oftentimes it's a big angry explosion or a big sad angry internal implosion, right? Um, so, when someone, especially at church, or it might be a well-meaning mentor in our lives, just somebody who like an older relative. Asians are so very much like the auntie will come over and be like, you should just let
Mhm.
them know. They're just like that. They're never gonna change. You be the bigger person.
Oh.
No, our simple answer can be like, "Oh, like, oh, that's what you think. Oh, okay. Thanks for sharing your opinion. And that soup you made was delicious. I'll see you next year at New Year's." Like, I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
But on our own, whether it's with the Lord or a trusted friend or a therapist or a life coach or a mentor,
Mm.
spiritual director, so many people out there who do healing and guidance. You just really taking the time to be like, okay, wow, when she said that, I felt like I was just like a 4-year-old,
Mm.
were telling me what to do, and that didn't feel
Right.
safe, but I'm then putting
Mhm.
pressure on me, and then for me, I like to say, like, let me imagine what did I look like at 4, right? Little Aggie,
Mm.
little Hannah. And let me just like imagine me giving that part of me a hug to be like, it's
Mm.
okay, you know? Like
Mm.
what they said, just because they're older doesn't mean that they're always right.
Mm.
Just because it
Yes.
sounds religious or they use a Bible verse doesn't mean that it's true. Right?
Mhm.
Just because
Yep.
they're a pastor doesn't mean that they're
Mhm.
always right. I would say they're almost always well-meaning, but
Mhm.
sometimes they're missing some of the information, right? So that
Yeah.
not quite the fit, the kind of
Mhm.
guidance you're getting,
Yeah.
the heart's there. We can be grateful for that. But
Right.
all children know is, oh, I'm not doing what you wanted. You're not happy with me. I must not be good.
Mm.
Yeah.
That right there,
Yeah.
for sure,
Yeah.
especially in Asian cultures where it's, like,
Yes.
so performance-based.
Yes.
Ugh,
Like, if I did
yeah,
something anything, I'm bad, even if I was being told to, like, hurt somebody else, right? Like, if
right.
I didn't please the older person or the authority or my parent, like, I'm bad. But, internally, you are the older person and the authority and the parent.
Mhm.
We have to reparent our inner child, that part of you, which is actually a collection of memories of nervous system states, right? So the little young insecure hurt part of you, she needs you, who you are
Mm.
today, to remind her again and again and again and again of the truths about her. Hey, you are not defined by them and what they say. You are
Mm.
not defined by your performance. You have inherent worth. You're not
Right.
alone. I'm gonna fight for you. Look at me. I just smiled at them and I said, "Oh no, thank you," and walked away. That was me fighting for you. Or
Mm.
here's what we do sometimes is we have to tell somebody who comes at us again and again. I have someone like that in my life too. And over the years, we've just gotten comfortable kind of saying things pretty straightforwardly, not
Mm.
meanly, just straightforwardly, right? And so, I'll just say, "Hey, like, I think I just see things differently than you, and I think I can imagine where you're coming from. If you'd like to share with me why you're telling me what you're telling me and why this means so much to you. Why does my behavior mean so much to you?
Mhm.
You can tell me your problem.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna take ownership of your problem with me. That's your
Mhm.
problem.
Right.
Happy to hold space if we're family or really close friends or community. But I will say, the thing is I've already decided how I'm gonna go about this. And,
Mhm.
um, while I, can see and wanna give you the benefit of the doubt that you have good intentions, I actually feel very misunderstood. I actually feel really stressed out. And I also feel like I need to set a boundary where I'm gonna ask you, "Can you not bring this up so much anymore? Or can you
Mm.
ask me permission?" Because if I've just had a bad week, or I'm dealing with a health thing or any other stressor, I might not be able to respond respectfully to you the way that I want to, especially if it's an elder, right?
Mhm.
So could you ask me, "Hey, can I talk to you about that one thing you're struggling with?" Right? Just like a friend would, right? And if you can't do that, I might need to either, like, not be in the same spaces as you at all, or very long, or very often. But I need to limit the amount of interaction we have if you can't keep the boundary and be a little bit more caring with my heart, because I do care for you, I do want us to have a good relationship, but if there's this thing you're doing that hurts me and harms me again and again and again, and you can't stop, I'll have to pull back from the relationship.
Mhm.
While I don't wanna do that, that's the only way I can stay in relationship with you without
Right.
also starting to see a lot of damage to our relationship. And if,
Yeah.
this does require that the other party sort of has a deeper understanding of
Mm.
empathy, communication, relationship skills, and it's okay if they don't. You say your piece, right?
Right.
But once I've set my boundary, the next time that they do it, I'll say, "I'm sorry, I need to stop you right there. Pretty sure I set a boundary last time. Like, are you able to stop? Because if you're not, I'll just go. I don't mean to be
Mm.
rude, but this is actively harming me.
Mhm.
I'm not in a place right now where I can handle this. So I'll go. I'll go to the bathroom and just take a moment for myself because I'm not calm right now. Or I'll go
Yeah.
I'll go get some coffee, or I'll go do the dishes and you can go do whatever. But like this is not okay, right? Um,
Mm.
a lot of cultures who have trauma, they minimize big things into little things. Any
Yeah.
bad emotion becomes this little thing, and they
Mhm.
and minimize. That's how they've
Yes.
coped. And all power to them. Like I'm not gonna, judge how they've been able to get over their crazy hard lives too. I mean, when we listen
Mhm.
to our parents and aunties and grandparents, wow, I can't even imagine, right?
Mhm.
Mm. But I let them know, like I'm glad it works for you. It doesn't
Mhm.
work for me.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
and I'm not 18 even. I'm 41,
Mhm.
or 30 something, right? Like I'm not under 25.
Yeah. Right.
My brain's fully formed. I have a full sense of adult identity. I know how I want to live. I'm married, right? Like I'm an adult who can decide things for herself, and I know that's not
Mhm.
comfortable for you. But one of the things I need to do is I need to protect myself, and this is also my way of protecting our relationship. And, some people, they just do it again and again, and I have had times where I'll tell, whoever that I go see that person with, "Hey, I'm not gonna go. I can't go. I'm not well enough. I'll take the responsibility myself. I am not strong enough to just, like, emotionally have this huge barrier and just let everything walk off or get off my shoulders." Now, there are
Mhm.
times where I've been able to, because God's done a work in me, but there's lots of seasons where I'm like, maybe in a year or 2 or 5 or 10, I'm not there today.
Hey, not today.
Yeah, yeah. I don't wanna show up at that thing with that person that we both care about, and then they do or say that thing again, and then I'm like a mess, and then I have to ruin everybody's day by, like, leaving in the middle of it. I'm
Mhm.
gonna do everybody and myself a favor and just not even go.
Right, right.
Right? Is that okay with you? Oh, it's
Mhm.
not? Okay, I'm sorry. How about I show face for 10 minutes, sing the happy birthday song, and then I go, right? Or I'm gonna camp out in the bathroom. Like, I'm gonna find a different way to temporarily avoid and create space, because this is not the time and place to have conflict. Now that said, there are times where some people, I've been like this myself, I've had clients like this where their complex trauma is so big that they're like really just sensitive to everything and they can't handle
Mhm.
anything. That's where, if you're family with this person, um, you tell them like, okay, I know you don't want to go, but we do have to eventually deal with this thing and we want to help, right? Then it's like, well, what's the safest way of doing that? Usually with mediation, like a therapist, a pastor, a third or
Mhm.
fourth party, right? Where everybody brings somebody to support them. So it becomes a little bit of a
Right.
conversation, which is biblical,
Mm.
right?
Yes,
Maybe one or
yes.
two or three.
Mhm.
And then you talk about it in a bigger way to say, hey, we see there's a struggle. How can we support? And then those other people are there to keep both of those people calm so that they can speak their truth. But also if, say, I don't know, Jane and John are fighting, right? And they're part of a small group and they have to see each other like 3 times a week because of church. And they're on the worship team too. Then the pastor and then their besties might come up, right? And they're all in a group together. Then it might be like, hey, Jane said this, and then John is like, "Oh, I didn't like that." And then eventually we might be like, "Okay, pastor calls time out. All right, so this is what we're hearing you guys say. This is what we think is the problem. I think you messed up here. I think you messed up here. You could have done better here." Or, "Hey, this person is so innocent. You're the one that kind of really messed up here. You need to apologize." Then you have a lot of accountability coming from the outside, and that continues, and that's like why I think we're meant to do life together as church. Then every day when they were breaking bread together, interacting, sharing all things in common, the Acts 2 church, you see the interactions. I'm sure people were offended and hurt all the time, right? You see the interaction, so there's always somebody nearby to be like, "You did that thing again. They asked you not to do that, and you did that
Mm.
thing again. You need to cut that out, brother." You know what I mean?
So there's accountability. Yeah.
Yeah, it was built in into the early
Mhm.
Christian church. I think now, how many 100 years later, it's a lot harder, right? But that is
Mhm.
why I think there's a lot of, idea about community and togetherness in scripture, and don't forsake the gathering of the believers, because it's like, if someone harms you and you're alone, you're not safe with that person. But if you're with 40 other people who all know what's going on and they're all praying
Mm-hmm.
and they all know that that person did wrong, you have 40 people that you're with, so you're safe now, even though the offender is there,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Of course, depending on the offense. But I
Right.
have heard of, Christian couples, even with, like, infidelity, um, like, getting divorced or being separated, but continuing to go to the same church together. 'Cause
Mm.
the church was big enough, number 1, and also,
Mm.
like, mature enough and had good leadership and guidance so that there was room for both until eventually one of them left. Um,
Mm.
but I have heard of church being a place where that's handled well, right? I don't think that's common, but I do think it is possible, and I do think it is biblical. The other thing is, like, I was pulling up the scriptures. I'm not big on Bible verse references, but I think it was Titus. If somebody just won't repent,
Mhm.
you can have Jane and John get together, the pastors, the small group leaders, the spouses, they're all having this big conversation. And John just refuses to stop cussing at Jane when he's angry. She sings off key, and he just calls her all these names, right? He just refuses to
Yeah.
stop. Um, John needs to be asked to leave the church, right? He needs to get out of all the group chats and all the Facebook groups, and people can unfollow him. Like, that's actually biblical. In
It
real
is
life, that
actually.
doesn't happen so easy, right?
Yeah.
But it is biblical when they're like, that person's condemned themselves. It's
Mm.
not about forgiveness anymore. That person
Right.
made a choice not to make reconciliation possible, right?
Yes.
So cutting
Yeah.
people out of your life, while it's like an amputation, while it's not desirable, it's a last choice option.
Mm.
But if you got gangrene and there's nothing you can do and it's too far gone, you gotta cut it off or the whole thing's gonna get cut off,
Right.
the whole thing's gonna die.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's why they were like, cut it out if they refuse to repent of certain sin,
Right.
right? Get them out because 'cause they're gonna infect everybody else, right?
Right, 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 right. Yeah, I think like um well, boundaries is set for both parties, for the good of both parties, for the protection of yourself, but also for them not to sin against you and God, right? Um and I feel like there's just some like long-term effects of just like
Yeah,
from my personal like childhood experience, because of the pressure of reconciliation all the time,
yeah,
and I didn't have like time to process, and also like it felt like this person got away with treating me, abusing me,
mhm,
and they just got away with it, and I just had to accept that it's okay for me to be abused all the time. So that led to low self-worth,
yeah,
and the enemy knows that. Even now, I'm struggling with that. And so the enemy knows that. And sometimes it gets so crazy. And I don't know how it gets to this point, but sometimes it gets so crazy that, like, I'm just like, you know what? I don't have purpose here. Like, nobody loves me. Nobody wants me. And I really just want to die at that moment.
yeah. Which
So,
how old is that part, right?
mm,
She's not in her 20s.
yeah, that was like since childhood, like all the way back
Exactly,
to childhood.
exactly. So that little voice that you feel that we all, I think, during really dark times, at least once in our lives, everybody's gone through this point where we're like, life isn't worth living anymore. It's going to be this painful and hopeless and despairing.
Hmm.
That's like a very child. It's coming from a very young place, right? And
Right.
that's where, we might do prayer counseling together where we're like, let's go in and find like the little one, right? And then
Hmm.
we can visualize you and I going in and Jesus coming in, just being like, we got you. It's okay. Let's go have ice cream at Disneyland. you know? Because in guided imagery and prayer, you can
Right.
imagine
Right.
anything.
Right.
Disneyland's free in here. But, right? It's that part of us. It's the echo of the 4-year-old, the 7-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old who was like, "What's the point of living if nobody loves me? If I'm not even
Mhm.
worth feeding and clothing and protecting, what's the point of living?
Right.
I should have never
Right.
been born," right?
Yeah. Yeah, it gets to that point sometimes.
All
So,
the time. Depression
mhm.
and trauma that's untreated ultimately results in death, and that's where the wages of sin is death, but the gift of
Mm,
God is eternal life, right? Actually,
yeah.
recently met someone who's not my client, but she, basically the typical Asian American Christian story of like, be the good girl, be everything that everyone tells you to do,
Yeah.
have your own
Mm-hmm.
identity, don't have your own values, don't have your desires, definitely
Yep.
never set a boundary or speak up or complain.
Yep.
Lived that life until her 20s,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
No desire to live, right? And
Right.
so when we spoke, I was like, of course not. You've never lived a day in your life.
To be for God, who
You've been
for
living for
God, like
everybody
who you
else.
created for God to be.
Yeah,
For God to
yeah,
live how God wants you to live
yes,
and
yeah.
how
You've
He
never
created for you
actually
to be.
lived the abundant life, John 10:10, that
Right.
Jesus died for you to have. You've never lived a day in your life as you because number one, you don't know who you are outside of
Mm-hmm.
somebody who pleases everybody else and meets everyone's
Right.
expectations. But two, even if you knew who you were, you have to have the skills to fight for you in that sort
Mm-hmm.
of toxic environment, right? Which for this young lady was like everywhere. There wasn't a single place she could go and be free from other people's expectations and the pressure to meet them, right? So, you know, the desire to not live is the desire to die, right? Not live anymore. What do they
Yeah.
call it in I've seen it on social media? Unalive. You're gonna unalive yourself or something like that. I was like, "Ah, I guess I like to kill."
Right.
But I was like, okay, well, so you want to be unalive? Like, I'm not intimidated by that. I'm familiar with that. It's part of my testimony too. I was like, how about you unalive yourself to those parts of you
Mm.
that are toxic, the toxic
Right.
codependency that we're raised with as Asian women, right? The fear of man. That's it very
Yep.
much in Asian culture, but especially for all women, right? The desire to have everyone's approval except the Lord,
Yeah.
right? The desire to be seen a certain way, right? But putting everybody else's opinions above that of God's. The false belief system that, if I meet everybody's expectations, they're happy with me and therefore I'm worth something. The
Right.
performance-based sort of value system and worth system. How about you die to all that BS? And then see what happens.
Right.
Kill off all those other lies, kill off the bad habits, let those die, right? Stop nurturing them. See what's left. Is there
Right.
a shred of something in you or your inner child or your heart where you're like, I get joy from, handing a cold water to a homeless man, right? Like that's something that's so beautiful and of you and of the Lord, right? No one
Mm-hmm.
else is looking. This is just about you doing something for you and for Jesus.
Right.
Is that worth living
Yeah.
for? Right.
For sure.
Of
Yeah.
service, maybe singing a song, maybe writing a book, maybe worshiping, maybe praying, maybe helping other people, whatever. Let's live to those things and none of this religiosity, unhealthy cultural expectation, codependency stuff, right?
Right. And yeah, I definitely have lived that. Like for
All of
sure, like as
that.
Asian women, like
Yeah.
just obey your parents, whatever they say, even though it's not right, just obey them. And like
Mm.
in the Bible, it says, obey your parents in the Lord. In the Lord. Not obey your parents in everything, in the
Caveat.
Lord.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so yeah, like once I moved here and just have space and time and space away from my family, I discovered running. I discovered, like I was like in pageants and fashion before. I like doing
Music, Aggie.
videos.
Yeah. You gotta sing
Yeah,
for one of these podcasts.
no, no. But it's just yeah, it's just so beautiful, like how God created for us to be so uniquely and specifically. And I think it's just so sad that it's just like trauma steals that away from us.
Yes. John 10:10, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy.
Yeah.
It's like
And
literally a strategic plan. Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, like we want like the approval of other people so that we feel like we're worth something.
Yeah.
For me is that, and also I feel like because during my childhood is like constant fear of punishment, constant fear of just abuse.
Yeah.
So I'm just used to doing what other people say so that
Yeah.
I have peace with them because I have fear like if I don't obey them, they could abuse me, whatever.
Ooh,
So
ooh,
I
peace.
give them I want peace with that person in expense of my own peace. with myself.
Yes. So is that really peace with that person, or is it just an absence of immediate conflict?
Is that one, absence. But I think it's peace
Absence of
because I
conflict.
don't have conflict, absence of conflict. Yeah.
There's actually personality types like Enneagram 9 and INFPs, that's Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram. They're also naturally very conflict avoidant. That's just how
Mhm.
they're built, but they're also known
Right.
as peacemakers, right?
Mm.
Um, it's not a bad thing to avoid conflict, but
Mhm.
there are certain things worth fighting for that we have to fight for because there's someone inside of us, like an inner child or a part of us that we need to advocate for that no one else did when we were younger, right?
Yes.
And it's hard to pick and choose battles though. Like I'm still learning myself. To
Right.
know when to fight, how to fight well. Scripture talks about, fight and stand, right? Fight and stand, fight, fight, fight. I mean, there's even a verse that says something like the kingdom is taken by violence. Like there's this part of coming up against evil and broken and darkness in other people and in the world that we have to have our fight on. Like our nervous system is like primed and ready to engage. But when you have a history like complex trauma and childhood PTSD, right? Where there was a need to fight evil things happening around you, like abuse,
Mhm.
and you're like 2, 3, 4, 5,
Mhm.
and it's your parent or like an
Mhm.
immediate older sibling who's causing the harm. You don't have any tools. You don't have any
Right.
skills, no ability. You barely have language, right? That feels, and I think that's the complex part of the trauma. It's recorded in our pre-verbal parts of the brain where we don't even have words. So
Mhm.
I've done brain spotting.
Mhm.
It's my trauma treatment, kind of like EMDR, but using the eye position to access parts of the brain. And that's where we want to actually like get at the feelings that are trapped in the brain and help organize them and allow your internal parts, different parts of your brain and your body to communicate internally to make information make sense inside. So when the body and the brain can organize the information a certain way that feels better on the inside, it feels better just even when you're triggered. It's not as accessible because it's been tucked away somewhere better, right?
Mhm.
And held
Mhm.
together a lot more neatly. But yeah, I mean, that's a really hard one when you've had that kind of reality since
Yeah.
you were young. Then when you're an adult and what emotionally drives you when you're in a painful place is that part of you that doesn't even know how to have any words. And then we end up with adults who like something bad's happening and they're just like, right? Like
It's
no,
freeze. It's like,
yeah,
yeah.
words, they literally have no voice. They don't know
Mhm.
what they would say, their mind goes blank, and their eyes usually kinda have this, like, empty dull stare, like a really scared child, right? And they're
Mhm.
just kind of like somebody zapped them with, like, a freeze ray, and they literally
Mm.
just are like, I don't know what to do, I'm just gonna sit here and take it just like I did
Yeah.
when I was a little kid,"
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And the so I was so during the pandemic, I learned a little bit more about, like, polyvagal theory and, like, the nervous system and trauma. So it goes from freeze to thaw, right? So when you're in
Mm.
freeze or shutdown mode, that's like the most far gone in the nervous system. That's incredible, incredibly long, complex trauma causes freeze most of the time for people. To come out of freeze, and slash fawn, right? Fawning is kind of like people pleasing, being overly
Yeah.
submissive. You gotta work back towards fight and flight as you thaw. And I generally encourage people to flight before they have the skills to fight.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just get out of there. A lot of Asian women, like, don't engage with, like, a larger male if you're alone, like, get out of there and come back to it or give him a good text or email, right? But eventually what we want is from someone to go from this, like, "I don't know what to say or do," to, like, being a skilled fighter, which means not I'm gonna punch you in the face with my words or my fist, but, "I'm sorry, that thing that you do, I can't tolerate that anymore. It hurts too much, and it makes me not wanna see you ever again.
Wow.
That would make me sad. Can you please stop? Oh, no, you
Mm.
can't? Okay, we're gonna have to do a trial separation." Like, I won't go to this church anymore. I won't come to these events anymore. I won't go to this workplace, whatever it is. I'm going to make sure I don't have to interact with you and give you some time. And if you're not going to change, and obviously I'm not going to let down my boundaries to allow you to harm me any further,
Right.
I'll do what I need to do to take care of myself. That is the ultimate fight. Is I'm exiting the situation, right?
How do you get to that point? Because I think I'm I'm still in the
Time, girl.
freeze point. Like, oh,
I know. Oh, it takes so much time. I mean, again, I'm in my 40s. I've been in therapy on and off since I was 18. And getting inner healing prayer since I was like 14. I'm still not done. I would say a lot of practice and finding community and being around other people who do the same thing, who are also healing alongside you in their own journeys, right? And that's where church,
mhm,
small group, best friends, girlfriends comes in handy, or just is really important. Um, but a lot of times it's just talking it out and even writing it out. I'm a big fan of
mhm,
like journaling and drafting out, and before I have a very serious thing to confront somebody with, and I'm actually a bit conflict avoidant myself. Like I'm a good, assertive communicator, but I take a long time before I give that big, like, I can't do this with you anymore. I don't give up
mhm,
easily on things. Um, but when I need to have that big communication, I'll usually write a long email
mhm,
and I'll sit on it and I'll edit it and edit it and edit it and
mhm,
edit it,
mhm.
right? I may never send it, but that's how I kind of make sense with them.
Process. Mhm,
And then I prepare. I've actually had to in the past fast and pray
mhm,
because I was just terrified. My heart was not in the right
mhm,
place. Every time I thought about it, I was angry and I would start crying. You know, something happened in seminary where I had to fast and pray because I was just like, I can't forgive that person. Like, I wanted to be physically violent and like damage property. I was that angry and hurt. But God's amazing. That person's one of my besties now.
mhm,
There were two people involved in it, and one of them's my bestie. And it was the Lord, right? I was ready
mhm.
to kinda, like, walk out on everything and just kinda take the losses, take the L's, as the young people say. But, God released something in my heart, and that person, when I finally confronted them, was just full of tears and apologies. I was really
Yeah.
surprised. And the other person avoided, but I could tell that they felt a lot of shame about what they'd done. Yeah. I would say like a religious church setting, fasting and praying, together with other people. There's a lot of power to that because
Mhm,
fasting tenderizes your heart and also strengthens you. We're
mhm.
physically weak, but emotionally and spiritually, we get really strong.
Strong. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. There's just something on
Yeah.
the inside, like your fight rises up. Like when you fast, we're irritable.
Yeah.
The Daniel fast, I'm like, I'm not eating cookies and bread and Diet Coke, leave me
Right.
alone. I'm living off of veggies and fruit for 40 days, right? Like, I'm not a happy camper, but something in me is very just
Mhm,
like, "Argh," like I'm leaning on my sword and it's planted in the ground, you know? If you have a big confrontation and you just need to be like, I can't do this anymore. I need an apology from you. I think in a close relationship, that's a form of fighting, right?
mhm.
Intimate one, like with a spouse. Like, that's not okay. I need you to say
Yeah.
sorry, and I need you to promise you're never gonna do that again, right? Or we're gonna go to counseling now, or we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that.
Mhm,
But that one thing, a no-go. And to the point where, some people have to sometimes be like, I have to end this relationship, even if it results in, all these other things. I can't keep going down this road with you like this. It's killing me, right?
right.
God will give you conviction. I mean, I would say even
Mhm.
people who are like, "Oh, I don't wanna say anything, it's okay." They spend years spiritually bypassing. There's a point where God will even stir up the heart of somebody and be like, I can't do it anymore." The sad thing is, as women, a lot of us end up with, like, autoimmune conditions. Some of us end up with cancer because it's genetically,
Mhm.
inherited, right? But those things get triggered, um,
Mm,
because of years of holding things in, not dealing with things,
mm.
never fighting back,
Yep.
never fighting and defending ourselves, right? Deal
Mhm,
a lot with, older women 40s and up for, well, white and non-white, but I largely work with, like, Latinas and, Asian Americans, so many autoimmune conditions, right? And I'm actually starting to see it younger and younger in women in their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
that's something that I'm very passionate about. Like, no, if it's mental health,
Mm.
and relational things that we can do something about causing us to physically get sick later,
Yeah.
like, we can prevent that. Oh, so that thing that happened when I was in seminary, you know what got me to fast and pray?
Mm.
I lost my period for a month. I was so
Mm.
stressed that, my period didn't come, and that usually doesn't bother me so much, but just that season, I was like, "Whoa, this is no longer a mental, emotional, social thing. This is now making me sick. My
Mm.
hormones are imbalanced."
Right, right.
My body literally was like, "And now we're gonna shut down a normal function we usually have."
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I was like, "I this whole drama here with my heart being broken, not worth me getting sick over.
Right.
I'm gonna fast
Mm-hmm.
and pray. We're gonna get through this," and then we did, right? But that's not usually how things happen, and, a lot of times we just have to say, like, especially if it's his family, this is one of the hardest ones, like a toxic, relative or just somebody that you have to see. You didn't choose them to be in your life, they just are. The churches
Yep.
you can leave, right?
Yeah.
But say it's like
Mm-hmm.
a cousin, an auntie, an in-law, a spouse. There's
Mm-hmm.
just times where if we know that we're called to stay in relationship, like, you're like, "Lord, can I just divorce and leave?" Like, there's people who ask the Lord that. And the Lord's like, "No, you stay with it." They're like, "Oh." Then it's like, "Okay, well, then how do I handle myself in this daily
Mm-hmm.
battlefield?" Right? That's where I really believe in, like, spiritual armor, community, healthy practices, and lots of boundaries, right? Yeah. Hard, isn't it, Aggie? It is
It's
hard.
so hard and tiring.
It is. All you viewers out there, we're with you. We don't have all the answers. We have lots of ideas, but we
Right.
don't have all the answers. It's so hard.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
crazy though, because just recently I learned that, like mental health affects your physical health. Like we
Yes,
don't
that
think
goes to
of it that way, especially as Asians. It's like emotions, they're not important. Mental health, they're not important, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So yeah. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks Hannah for sharing
Course.
so much wisdom and yeah, I really appreciate you and thank you for always praying for me and walking with me and
So much love.
I I just love like my favorite thing with you doing therapy is like going to my inner Aggie, like
Mhm.
inner child Aggie, and
Yeah.
just telling her, it's okay. And just going through that time period where it was so hurtful and
Yeah.
just revisiting that and having Jesus heal that moment.
Yeah.
So, it's a
And
process. It's a
alone.
long process.
It is. It is. But it's a worthy one. It's a
Yes.
worthy one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thanks, Hannah. Could you pray us out before we close,
Yeah.
please?
Sure.
Yes.
Jesus, you shed blood to make even all of this that we're talking about possible. Forgiveness, healing, reconciliation, boundaries, assertive communication, fighting the good fight, all of that. It's because your blood was shed to give us new life and to give us hope and to show us a better way. Um, God, we just pray for all the relationships in our lives and give it to you. Thank you for how far you've brought us on our healing journeys and for those of us journeying with us and sharing this conversation that we're having today. We just pray just a covering of your grace over them. It requires so much grace to forgive, so much grace to reconcile, and so much grace to even realize that reconciliation is not possible.
Mm.
And Lord, we thank you that you're never going to leave us or forsake us. You are Emmanuel in all of this. From the first moments that we experienced traumatic things as children,
Mm.
those painful heartbreak moments of people not hearing us, not knowing our heart, misunderstanding us, accusing us, shaming us, abusing and neglecting us. You were always there through it all, loving us and holding us. And we don't know why you allow hard things and pain,
Mm.
but we do know that it's for a good purpose in the long run. Um, And so we thank you that your heart is always to bless us and to love us and prosper us. Um, and just that you have a plan for our lives. As they say, if we're still alive and we're still breathing, like, you're not done with us.
Mm,
The story's not over. You're still writing our story. And my friend Jen, who's an amazing warrior, she would always say, Lord, that the mess that you allow us to
mm,
experience in life becomes the powerful message that will bring healing, and
mm.
deliverance and redemption. And the tests that we are going through now, the many, many tests that are so unpleasant and so hard and stressful, you are equipping us with a testimony and you're giving us
Mm.
authority in different parts of our lives. And we thank you for that, God, because this is the one way life we live, but we have all of eternity with you and one
Amen.
another, Jesus, and we
Mm.
know that's gonna be a really good one.
Yes.
No more
Mhm.
tests and messes, please.
Yes, Lord Jesus.
Just
Thank you,
testimonies.
Lord. Mhm.
Feasting at the wedding banquet
Yes.
table
Mm.
of the Lamb.
Yes,
Um,
Lord.
yeah, God, we thank you and we love you and we ask the blessing over Aggie and DJ and the rest of the season and the amazing conversations that they'll have and just what you are doing, God, to get the stories out, so that we can encourage one another in this online worldwide community. We thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Hannah. And listeners, check out the show notes at erasingshame.com and like, subscribe, follow so you don't miss out on an episode. And see you next time. Bye.
1, 2,